This is Matthew Lyman, the host of the Landlord Advocates. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We have a special guest who is going to be joining us momentarily, who is running for the New York State Assembly District 110th District. Her name is Alexandra Velella. We had a chance to meet her quite a few months ago, talk to her, learn about her. She's active. She has initiatives. She has plans and ideas to change what's going on here in New York State. One of which is her opponent, Mr. Phil Steck. Is her opponent who's been in office too long. It's time for him to go. And we believe that Alexandra will be the one to change some of the initiatives that he has had. So without further ado, we would like to welcome Alexandra to the show.
Hello, how are you?
Great. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Great. Alexandra, her and I met a few months ago at a Republican Party picnic, and we hit it off. Talked about different issues that have been facing landlords, housing providers in New York State, mainly since April of 2019, when the Democratic Party has taken over New York State government, the Senate, the Assembly, and the governor's office. We need to change what's going on in New York because many things that landlords have been facing have been highly oppressive. Some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight with Alexandria, as we all know, is good cause eviction.
Yes.
Yes. And we're going to talk about ERAP, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. And we're going to talk about the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act, a couple of aspects of that law. Now, for those of you who are joining us, you can always feel free to ask questions. When you do, we will put those questions on the screen. Ask away. We'll put you on. And Alexandra will be more than happy to answer those questions. Alexandra, let's begin with the law that came out in 2019 is what is called the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
There are various aspects of this law. It's about 75 pages long. It's highly oppressive to housing providers. And when it's oppressive to them, that trickles down to everyone else. Those who are not landlords and those that are just, I own my own home. People are not going to buy real estate. We see that the market is starting to go down now. And with these oppressive laws that are out there, it's going to hurt everyone in the real estate industry. There are a couple of aspects of this law that I want to go over with you.
Okay.
One of them is when a prospective tenant goes to a landlord and says that I am interested in renting your apartment. That landlord may have 20, 30 criterion that they use to determine whether or not they want that tenant to be theirs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, under this Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act, one of the criteria that landlords are not allowed to examine is any public or private records of a tenant's past or current eviction history. That is a monumental aspect that landlords have been utilizing for a very long time to decide whether they want to rent to Alexandra or not. What are your thoughts on this legislation, this law, that does not allow landlords to look at those lists? If they do, it's a $500 to a $1,000 fine. What do you think about that?
I mean, I used to be a renter for a very long time. I went to college and law school in New York City. It was, rents were astronomical and it was a nightmare finding an apartment. I mean, you'd have to show up day one, documents in hand, ready to sign on the dotted line, or you were on to the next one. But I certainly believe that property owners should have the right to sort of secure their investment and know who they're allowing to live in these spaces, in these homes, to ensure that they are going to be able to keep up their end of the bargain. I mean, in any other contractual agreement, it's called due diligence.
Yes.
And, as far as records of prior evictions, most court proceedings are public record. Why would that be different?
Yes. One of my colleagues mentioned that today, that other court records are a matter of public record, but evictions are not. The argument that we have made at the Landlord Advocates on our social media is that you have an eviction that happened because one of three things did not happen.
Mhm.
The landlord asked you to move by a certain date. You didn't do that. Then the landlord said, listen, you're destroying my property. I need you to stop or move. You did not do that.
Mhm.
Or you chose not to pay rent for months on end, and the landlord had you evicted for not paying the rent.
Mhm.
Any one of those three things was a lawful act through the court system.
Mhm.
Jurisprudence went through. The case had been adjudicated in favor of the landlord,
Mhm.
housing provider, whatever they want to call it. And it was not something deviant. It wasn't something illegal. It was perfectly legal. But yet, New York State on June 14th, 2019 said that you cannot look at any of these records as it is a $500 to a $1,000 occurrence. In my business of 32 years of assisting landlords, we have had clients who have come in who want to remove a tenant. And I have a memory like an elephant.
Mhm.
And we will find that I will see a name, and oh, I know that one. And we may have evicted them 8, 9, or 10 times. And yet these landlords cannot come to us and say, have they been evicted? They can't go to the court. They can't go to the sheriff. We need to see many aspects of this HISTPA, as we call it, repealed, revoked, removed. This is one of those. Another aspect of Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019 is one where the tenant, I put you in, Alexandra, to move into my home. I think you're going to be a great tenant. But then all of a sudden, you move in Snow White, the Seven Dwarfs, Santa Claus, all the elves, and you can move in as many people as you want because the landlord can say, hey, there's too many people, but the local code enforcement building inspector will do nothing about it. But the point of this is that the law says that even if you have in a lease that these are the only people that can live in the dwelling, that's not legal anymore. They can move people into the apartment without your knowledge or permission or your ability to vet these tenants. And now they're in your apartment. The tenant is to tell you who they moved in as their co-occupant 30 days later, and they're supposed to under the law. But if they don't, what repercussions do the landlords have? Nothing. They have to evict the tenant that they placed. But here's the caveat, Alexandra. Here is the caveat. On the warrant of eviction, the landlord must have all of the names of the tenants listed on that warrant of eviction, or those people remain on the property. What can see these legislators to pass such oppressive aspect of this law that says that landlords cannot stop somebody from moving in that they didn't put in? This is something that when you get elected and you take office on January 1, you have got to address this. What do you think?
I think this, I'm also an attorney and I see a lot, and I practice in the workers' compensation world, but, I see a lot of situations where I think, I hope that these legislators just, like, the way things played out, it was a set of circumstances and facts that this is never something that entered their mind when they, I try to attribute the best intentions, we'll say. They never thought it through. They never thought that this was how this part of the law would be abused. But the fact that that is a way that the law is being abused by moving people into a house, and I know you're required to give the 30 days notice of someone moving in, but it prevents people from being able to be evicted because they're not able to be named on the notice. So they just can stay. So you move someone in, you don't tell your landlord their name, they can't evict them. But it seems as though nobody is looking at the real life consequences of these things, or how they really play out in practice. And I like to think that they didn't know these loopholes, so to speak, would have come about. But the fact that nobody's attempting to remedy the situation, now that they're aware of it, now that they have people like you advocating for landlords and bringing it to their attention, that it's a problem. And it makes me question whether or not I should be assuming that people have the best intentions when they're making these laws.
I will tell you that I have been following when they passed the eviction moratoriums, and I have listened to members of the Assembly and the Senate. I testified at the New York State Senate on January 7th regarding good cause eviction.
Mhm.
And the ideologies that they espouse regarding these situations makes one believe that they are completely clueless as to the ramifications of the laws that they're passing.
I don't doubt it.
That's why we need you to get into office, bring back reality, bring back sense of justice and sense of stability and reality to the subject, because it's unbelievable. I remember on September 1st, Assemblyman Jeffrey Dinowitz
Mhm.
had said on the assembly floor regarding judgments that landlords can get from tenants who have owed months and months worth of rent. He had said, well, landlords can get a judgment and collect on that money later on. Okay, I will tell you in my
now.
Absolutely, they're not collecting. I can tell you in my 32 years in my office, we have well over $5 million in uncollected rents. That's a lot for upstate New York. Downstate, no. Landlords do not collect on these judgments. So for Jeffrey Dinowitz and his cohorts to say, oh, they can get the money later on is beyond ridiculous. It's preposterous. But
I mean, at a certain point, I don't know, the old saying, you can't take blood from a stone. And if these people are living beyond their means and they cannot afford to be in that apartment or house or whatever it is, getting them out of their lease is almost a blessing in disguise.
yes.
And
the
I
unfortunate
was in New York City where my rent was like astronomical.
Yes. And rents are going up.
I didn't want to sink my whole paycheck into it.
Yes. And one of the things that we've seen, Alexandra, since the passage of a lot of these oppressive laws, and some that we'll talk about momentarily, is that landlords are putting the brakes on putting you in because it's hard to get you out. And the rents are going higher and higher because they need to have some viability to say, I want to continue to be a landlord to make some kind of a profit.
Yeah.
The problem with a lot of these legislators, quite honestly, is that they think that they're solving a problem when they pass laws, but in fact, they're creating the problems that they're trying to solve because the problem doesn't exist.
Either that or they just create a new problem and a different problem and another problem because they didn't really solve the first one when they took a whack at it.
Right.
And I think, too, a lot of the times they have this vision in their head of the big conglomeration of this guy who owns 20 apartment buildings and is raking in millions, when really most landlords are people that either, inherited a parent's home and they keep it and they rent it out, or people who have bought a second home, or people who lived here and moved out of state, as many, many, many have, but they have kept their home here and they're renting it out and they rely on that income. And, this vision of every landlord is, swimming around in their pool full of money like Scrooge McDuck, and every tenant is, making a choice between living in this apartment or living under a bridge. That's just not reality.
Absolutely not. And the legislators that believe this need to come out of their office and learn about the reality of the situation. We have seen during these eviction moratoriums since February, March of 2020, we have videos that we have produced in court where the tenants are on vacation in Florida. Facebook videos showing themselves having a grand time, and at the same time applying for a program we're going to talk about momentarily called ERAP.
Mm-hmm.
So they're applying for programs, they're applying for social services. I know we had a tenant who owed about $4,000 in rent, and when one of our process servers gave her the paperwork to come to court, she had told that process server that, "Oh, I have the money to pay, but I applied for ERAP so that they would pay my rent for me. So therefore, the ERAP pays. She gets to take that $4,000 and spend it any way she chooses." Now, there's other aspects, Alexandra, that we can go on about Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act. When that came out, we had considered doing one video on our YouTube channel on the whole act. But we decided that if we did, it would become a mini series of 8 weeks on television, and we're like, there's no way. So we extrapolated different aspects of this, and we did videos on some of it. We can go on and on about other ones. One in particular is that when a landlord wants to rent to you, your credit may not be all that good,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore they may want from you first, security, and last month.
Mm-hmm.
Here in New York State, you can no longer take last month's rent. So therefore, you may have a tenant that's borderline with a credit score.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, if they were to provide that last month's worth of rent, they might be able to garner the tenancy that they're seeking. But the landlords, property managers, real estate brokers are saying no. And therefore, they're not finding housing. That's another one. But that's on for one. There's so much more on that one. But on to the next one that I want to talk about. And that is the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. This program here came out in June of 2021. It had about $2.6 billion to help pay the rents of those tenants here in New York that were falling behind. It will pay 12 months in the past and 3 months going forward, a total of 15 months from March of 2020 until right now. The problem with this, Alexandra, is from the very beginning, it was a debacle.
Oh, yeah. And it seems like it was something that was slapped together in response to COVID, and there was just no thought
No.
about the sustainability of this whole process. And, you know,
Well, one of the things that they did is New York State had to supplement. They hired a private company, and the name doesn't hit me right now. They hired a private company to run the program. And the state of New York had to supplement that firm with state workers. And we had demanded that no tax dollars should have to pay for the additional workers that the state provided to this company. Nothing in the retirement, nothing in the healthcare. This company should pay every aspect of that person who's working on this program.
mm-hmm.
We still don't know, and that may be something that we can check out. Has that happened? Or have the taxpayers been on the hook when this company made millions of dollars to run this program? I, for one, if I was legislator Lyman, would immediately take away all the profit that this company made and pay back the state workers that were provided for this program. This program right now is one where a tenant can apply, and it will delay the eviction for 3 to 4 to 8 months. And in that time frame, tenants cannot be evicted until that application has been approved. It might be pending, it may be denied, but the whole realm of the eviction is on hold until the state makes a determination. We have said, and many of us, go ahead.
Is that once there's a determination, if it's unfavorable to the tenant, there's an appeals process that just sort of starts the ball running again. And then if the appeal is unfavorable, they can just reapply.
Yes.
I read an article about it a couple months back about this elderly couple that had rented out a room to some like young real estate agent, and he hadn't paid them rent, and he was like terrorizing these. They were very like sickly and elderly, and it's so sad. But they finally managed to, I believe what happened was like members of the community came together and basically helped them get him out and contributed to a fund of some kind to pay them back for all of the past rent, because it was like a heartbreaking story.
Yes. We
And
have one of our social media followers, Mario, who lives in Canada, and he's got property in New York City. I believe it's Staten Island, I believe.
Mhm.
Mario, if I got it wrong, I apologize. But his tenants, one is a husband and wife. He is retired. She is a dentist. They owe him tens and tens of thousands of dollars in rent. They pay nothing, and they declare bankruptcy. He still can't get them out. They've been in court, I believe he told me, 16 times in trying to get these people out. There is actually a state senator, a Democratic state senator, whose attorney, his staff attorney applied for ERAP because he wasn't paying for his apartment here in Albany, New York. We have told many of our people, Alexandra, when they come in and they say, well, the tenant is working, they have a job. I would tell them, I don't care, because anyone, Elon Musk, Warren Buffett, any one of them can apply for ERAP. It will be denied 6, 7 months from now, but nobody can be evicted. Right now, our last finding is that there's over 140,000 applications for ERAP pending. The Biden administration gave another $100 million to New York State for that program.
Isn't all the money gone?
It keeps getting gone, but what's been happening is that they've been stretching that rubber band, and well, okay, it's been a few months, it's time to end, and then they get a few dollars more, and then it brings the rubber band back. So now they're looking at applications through August of 2022. Anything after that are not even being looked at. They're just sitting away in some file cabinet, rotting away. And in the meantime, the landlord is sitting there, and the clock is tolling, the bills are tolling, and he or she cannot get rid of this tenant. Right now, the estimates are it would take about $1.7 billion with a B to pay off or to pay some of the money that ERAP is doing. Now, one of the things, Alexandra, with ERAP is that if ERAP pays $1, the landlord cannot raise the rent for a year. They cannot evict the tenant just because they want them gone for 1 year from that. So we have said on earlier videos that ERAP is going to pay enough just to allow the tenant to get the protections afforded to them. So the landlord may get 1 month or 2 or maybe even 15. But because this has been going on for so long, they still have 12, 14 months of no rent whatsoever. When you get into office, we've been asked, Matt, do you believe that when will ERAP end? I said, it will not end with the current administration. They're going to keep it going and going and going, as this is a de facto eviction moratorium. We ask you, on behalf of landlords across New York State, what will you do when you get into office to either end ERAP? I will tell you personally, I want ERAP to end. The money has got to stop. People got to get back to work. Rather than sitting back on their laurels waiting for taxpayers to pay their rent, we must. I will tell you, I'm giving you a little hint, a little heads up here. We want ERAP to end. We want it to go away, and with the current administration, it's not going to happen. What will you do to stop this?
I think we all have to come to terms with the fact that the COVID emergency is over. I see the need. When this all first started, everyone was terrified. I was like, I was scared to death to even go outside and like be near people. But the emergency is over. And these protections that again, like to think came from a good place, because it was, the world shut down initially for 2 weeks, but we all know how that worked out.
Yes.
I mean, I came upstate from New York City for 2 weeks to flatten the curve with like a couple of pairs of leggings and 3 hoodies. And it was finally like, oh God, I have to go back to that city and get more clothes. But, people lost their jobs. I was very fortunate to keep my job during that period. And I can't imagine how difficult it would have been had I lost my job. And I understand people needing a way to fill that gap, but the gap, and there's no reasoning for it anymore. Things have opened back up. Pardon me, a little cold. Things have opened back up, and I mean, you can't go 2 feet anywhere in the state without seeing help wanted signs. Every restaurant, every small business, every business entity that has made it through these lockdowns is desperate for people to work. And my own law firm, they're looking all over for people. And, I think that ending ERAP, and I mean, at this point, I would say that landlords will be happy to just know that there's some way of recouping their loss. And if that means having to work with people to implement payment plans, at least they'll be able to recoup something. And it won't be on the taxpayer's dime.
Yes.
And, there's means testing that can be done for people who are going back to work, finding jobs. Like I said, you can't pass a store, you can't pass a business without seeing a help wanted sign. So working with these people and these landlords and finding a way to implement payment plans, help them recoup their losses instead of just saying, okay, well, let the government step in and use tax dollars to cover it. And, they're not really going to cover it. They're going to end up raising taxes.
Yes, that's what the landlords are saying. One, even if they're getting the money, we're creating a society of apathy and dependence. Well, you see people now who don't want to go back to work. They'd rather work in their home rather than go to the job site. We have people, as you have said, there's flyers everywhere. We know of businesses that did not open for a couple of days here or there. They have no staff. You go in there, and a restaurant, a grocery store, you go into the local Walmart, and you might have one cashier out of 13 or 14, but you have self-checkout. They can't find anyone. Or we're in a position where people want $25 and $30 an hour for a job that really does not qualify for that kind of pay. So they're sitting back because they know that their rent is paid, their national grid, whatever government other assistance programs, whether it be food stamps or HEAP that they're getting. And when necessity is the mother of invention is what we need to do to take care of and put a roof over our heads. And when the government is consistently doing this, to the point where landlords are going to court. Alexandra, I have had clients come into my office who have told me that they want to kill themselves, that they are losing their homes. These homes, as you alluded to earlier, are mom and pops, whether they're big or small. This is their child's retirement. This is their retirement. This is their child's education for college later on. And where is it the right? Where is it the right of New York State government to take away the contracts clause, the due process clause, the takings clause of the Constitution against landlords? Come on, you're an attorney, this isn't right.
Agree. I mean, I think people should have the freedom to enter into contracts and create the terms that, it's a negotiation. And for the most part, from what I've seen, most people are just using pretty standard boilerplate contracts, but you should be able to put whatever you want in there. And if someone else agrees to that, that's the deal. And at the same time, I'm not heartless. I represent claimants, injured workers before the Workers' Comp Board. And I've seen, people who, are hardworking people get totally screwed over by the system and end up, in a world of financial hurt because of whatever circumstances. And I do believe in the need for a social safety net to some degree, but these things that are supposed to be temporary end up lasting forever and doing more harm than good, because instead of being a safety net to kind of hold you over through the rough patch, it becomes a long-term thing. In my field, it's treatment. If someone is some sort of, has a job that requires a lot of manual labor and they get a shoulder injury that takes them out of work, sometimes I'm sitting there litigating for months and months or years even to get them the surgeries they need. Oh, they have to go to PT. This guy's not getting better with PT. Like, he needs a surgery. Give him the surgery. Okay, now I'm going to have to sit through however long, 3 months of depositions with some doctor that's not going to show up 3 times and go before a judge and pray to God that he has an understanding of what this guy needs. So, we implement these social safety nets, but we make so much red tape. We make nonsensical hoops for people to jump through. And it goes from being a safety net to just being like a giant pit of just a giant mess.
Yes.
It makes things worse.
One of the things that we've had, and I myself, my office and my team have facilitated thousands and thousands of evictions across upstate New York for 32 years. We had a case a few months ago, maybe a little over a month ago. The tenants owe a little over $20,000 in rent.
Mm-hmm.
And the case went to court. Our attorney had excused away all of the rent that ERAP would have ever paid to get the warrant of eviction to get the tenant out. There was a forgiveness of over $10,000 in rent. All the tenant had to do was spend about 10 minutes and fill out the ERAP application online. They didn't upload any of the documentation. So I have said that those tenants made $1,000 per minute by filling out that damn application. Now, after the fact, what happened with us is after the fact, the case went through. The judgment was awarded for the whole amount, because the agreement was turn in the keys by a certain time. The judgment will be this amount. If you don't turn the keys into the attorney, the amount will be escalated up to the amount it should have been, and the warrant of eviction issued. One of the things that we have found is that some sheriff's departments are not executing the warrants of eviction because the tenants are waiving the ERAP application when the sheriff shows up. That is happening in Schenectady County. I don't want to throw them in the bag, but that's what's going on right now. And under the law, when the case has been adjudicated through the court system, the only way that the eviction is stopped with the issuance of the warrant of eviction and the sheriff coming, or the constable or the marshal, is either the landlord withdraws it and says, I'm letting the tenant stay, or an order to show cause has been filed and signed by the judge, served upon the plaintiff's attorney, served upon the sheriff's office, and the case is brought back to court. Right now, that is an issue here in Schenectady County, where we have been addressing this issue because the tenants who know that this is going through court, ERAP is not a factor anymore. The sheriff shows up and they waive the ERAP application, and the sheriff walks away like it's a pit of vipers, and they walk away. The tenants are using ERAP not as a means to get their rent paid and to help the landlord get back on their feet. They're weaponizing ERAP to screw the landlords over, to allow them to stay on the property indefinitely until the case has been through the court system for 6, 7, 8 to 10 months or even longer. That is why I will tell you on behalf of the landlords that I work with and here on social media and on Twitter, they have said ERAP is a fraud. As you can see, one of our guests here said that New York ruined my life. It's state-sponsored theft. And that's exactly what it is. And that's why I will tell you that we need you to get into that office along with Joe Mastriani and our other friends to change what's happening in New York. And that's one of the things. ERAP has got to go. So I'm giving you a directive, Alexandra. When you get in on January, you got to get rid of ERAP. Now, another aspect that has been hurting landlords, or what they have been proposing, is I want to pull it up here on the screen. Let me just get to it here. Is this? It's called good cause eviction. What good cause eviction is doing is it's been tried now 3 years in a row here in New York. The main sponsor of that is Julius Salazar, a Democratic Socialist of America senator, along with Brad Holyman, along with Jeffrey Dinowitz from the Assembly, Brian Kavanaugh from New York City, Harvey Epstein on the Assembly, and quite a few others. I've been supporting. As you can see on the screen, you can see that Zellner, today the tenants win. No, today everyone lost. It's highly oppressive towards housing providers. What this has been doing is that under good cause eviction, and we testified at the New York State Senate in January that in good cause eviction, in the legislation as it is written now, there's nothing that defines good cause eviction. And
Seems to be an ongoing problem with our legislature, throwing terms into bills that are never defined or poorly defined, or, just create more questions than answers and more problems than solutions.
Well, we interviewed Mr. Phil Steck a few months ago.
Oh, yes.
He forgot that we were going to interview him, even though he agreed to the interview. And when we went, he said he didn't have much time. I said, well, you committed to this. I put his hand to the burner. He then, before our cameras were rolling, he had laid out to us what it was. What is it that you want to talk about? And it was going to be what we are talking about right now, Alexandra. That's what we're talking about right now. The one bill that I initiated with him was the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act. And his response to me was, housing what? And I said to him, just like this, I said to him, Assemblyman, it is a bill that you co-sponsored in June of 2019. Oh. Just like that. He refused. He told me the groundwork on what he was going to talk about and what he would not talk about. I wanted to broach the subject of housing stability, and he refused. He didn't talk about good cause eviction. He didn't talk about ERAM. It was a lot of political jargon. He was avoiding, and he had to hurry up and leave. Now, with good cause eviction, we mentioned. I'm sorry?
That's par for the course from what I hear.
Yes. And I'd be willing to interview him again, but I'm sure it would be very contentious. He turned around, and I told him under good cause eviction that because there's no definition there, in one municipality, a tenant calling somebody a bad name, the landlord a bad name, a derogatory term for race or sexual orientation or any nationality, whatever you want to call it, could the landlord evict the tenant based upon that? In one municipality, the answer would be yes. And then in the neighboring municipality, the answer is no.
Seems like it's essentially just make it up as you go. Do whatever you want, and we'll see what happens. And that, that's not fair to tenants or landlords.
No. And when you have that,
it should be something that people could digest and understand so that you know what the limits are. You know what the parameters are. You know what is good cause and what is not good cause.
Yes. Now, there are already programs in place to help tenants in a retaliatory eviction. They have a right to contact the building and codes department if there's deficiencies in the apartment. Mm-hmm. But that's a whole other subject too. Many tenants are using the buildings department, code enforcement as not as a shield, but as a sword to go after landlords. So the issue could be they're going to come to court, they're going to complain about something in the apartment that they may have caused themselves. And then the court's going to determine was it good cause for the landlord to bring them to court. And if not, case dismissed. Now, how fair is that? It's not. The other aspect of this legislation is that you cannot raise rent more than 3%. More than 3%. Now, we all know that food prices are at a 40-year high. Gas prices, commodities. Go ahead.
I mean, everything is through the roof. And it just seems like an effort to make rent stabilization the law of the land. And, I lived in New York City. I lived in a rent stabilized apartment for a little while. I have friends that did, and I have friends that didn't. And let me tell you, there was a big difference in quality. But the fact of the matter is, you own this property as a landlord, and you should be able to set a lease for a year, for 2 years, and then, if you want to bind yourself to an increase to keep good tenants, to a cap on an increase, you can do that within the contract that you're signing. And if you want to lose these tenants, there's a supply and demand. The market will do what it does. If you decide you're going to raise the rent a ridiculous amount, no one's going to live there, and you're going to lose out.
That's right.
So
Yes.
there's incentives both ways. You can keep the people you have that are good and agree with them in a contract. Say, you know what? I promise you that if you want to renew the lease next time, I'll only raise it X amount. You should have the ability to do that with property you own.
Yes.
And then if you want to raise it like some crazy amount and put a fortune into upgrades and do whatever you want to do, by all means. I hope you find somebody with some money to burn, because it seems like the state's taking all of it from most of us.
Absolutely. When you look at the 3%, we already know all of the goods and services that we utilize on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, whatever it might be, are far higher than 3%.
Oh, God, yeah.
So why are they, even with rent stabilization, rent control, and they're trying to do that in the city of Schenectady now with rent stabilization. And one of the city council members, Damani Farley, had stated that they want to be able to incentivize landlords to support rent stabilization. When he said that, my mind exploded.
I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things, they were supposed to have a town hall meeting on that subject, and I digress, but they were going to have a town hall meeting on that a few weeks ago. Well, we did a social media and an email blast informing housing providers to be there, and our cameras would be there as well. About 2 hours later, City Councilman Powell Williams decided to cancel the town hall meeting less than 5 hours before it began. We took credit for that. The Times Union gave us credit for that, and Talk 1300 gave us credit for that, to say that this is probably the reason why they canceled it. What our argument was going to make, and we're going to make it when they do have this town hall meeting in November, is that there is no business anywhere in the universe that will ever support any oppressive laws that will decide what they can charge for the goods and services that they provide. As you alluded to a few minutes ago, the market will do that for us. So the 3% is crazy. Right now, one of the complaints that they made is that the rents are going up too high in Schenectady County and other counties. But when you look at what New York City may have, when you look at what California may have, 3 or 5 or 7% increase in rent yearly or bi-yearly is not that much. But the fact that the legislators have said that if good cause eviction does pass, it's fair 3 years in a row, and we're hoping that it does next year when the Assembly and the Senate have more Republicans in there. Honestly, I'm sounding biased here, but it's the truth. I mean that, because I've seen it. When I have a landlord in my office who is sobbing on my shoulder, and this shoulder right here, my right shoulder, is damp, when they walk away from hugging me, from their crying because of what's happening to them, and the tenants are laughing at them because of what New York State has done, Alexandra. Mm-hmm. You and Joe and everyone else, Mary Beth Walsh, all of you have got to take a stand and end this nonsense now, because we will remember if you don't. We need to have this stuff ending now.
I think that you've got a lot of, there was just an article in Politico. It was behind a paywall, but you could go find it on my Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
I like that, yes.
And there are a lot of young Republicans running this year against, we'll call them entrenched
I
establishment.
was thinking the same word.
um, you know, the journalist who came out to interview me is actually from this area, but he said, I've never seen the Democrats throwing money into their races, including my opponent, who's gotten over $100,000 from the Democratic Assembly Campaign Committee. I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 125 by now. That was just based on their last filing. And, suffice it to say, I'm not spending anywhere near that sum, but
the fact that they're spending that
spending
shows
it,
that you are a threat to him.
and they're spending it against people who are young Republicans who are first time or, very new to politics, and who are doing this because of their passion for this state, because we want this place to be the place we grew up in, essentially. We want to be able to keep our jobs here. I certainly don't want to have to go take a bar exam again. That was not fun. We want to be able to raise families, and we want to be able to buy homes and build our lives and, follow in our parents' footsteps in many respects. And it's so, I think, both sides of the aisle have their problem with the establishment figures, but we're making a mark, we're making a difference. And even if it's not a clean sweep, we've got them, their backs against the wall, and they're fighting like hell. And I'm hoping that this recent Quinnipiac poll shows that Lee Zeldin is just outperforming expectations in New York City, which is huge because there's such a large number of votes that come out of there. He's leading in the suburbs. He's leading in the North Country. And I think if, we manage to pull that one off, it will have a down ballot effect that will yield astronomical results for this party and for people who really believe in individual rights and hard work and sort of finding your path and fulfillment in yourself and, liberty and freedom and property rights, essentially. There's so many people, and I'd encourage you to go read that piece. But,
I follow you on Twitter, you know that.
Oh, yeah. Got a little heated last night.
It's that way. That feels stuck. And I won't get into, we know some of the things that he has said about you and about family.
Mhm.
And that turns a lot of people off. When we read that piece, that information that he sent out on Twitter,
Mhm.
it disgusted me beyond words of what he has said. And I will not discuss that in this. You wish to, I'm not going to, but if you wish to bring it up, you have that right. If you don't, I respect it either way. But he has lost a lot. Not that he had much respect from me anyway. And I'll tell you one of the reasons why I don't really respect him is back in January of 2020, he attended a landlord meeting that I was one of the speakers at. And because of these laws that have come out, it's cost landlords and housing providers a lot of money in postage because they have to mail out more things to the tenants. And I will tell you, when he attended the meeting, prior to the meeting commencing, he was on his cell phone on top of the table. It was a square formation with tables. When the meeting commenced, the cell phone went down towards his lap and then under the table. As I was walking around giving a presentation about the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act, I was going to hit the room with a big bomb of information, and he was not paying attention. And that bomb that I had dropped to everybody in the room is that my office, from June of 2019, with that passage of housing stability, through January of 2020, are you ready for this, Alexandra? My office spent close, and we're only talking about $500 timbers, $10,000 in postage. $10,000. And this is directly related to the laws passed. We were thinking, is New York State trying to bail out the postal service by enacting all these laws that make landlords pay? When he was ignoring me, you don't do that. Don't ignore. When he did that, he was over to my right. And when I sent the amount, I yelled it very loudly, looking right at him. I startled him, but I did not care because he was there to learn what landlords and housing providers are going through. And instead, he found whatever was on his cell phone to be more interesting. That's disrespectful to the electorate. You don't do that. If you want to get on your phone, go in the bathroom, but do not do it in front of the people who invited you to come to listen to what our grievances are and our concerns. You don't do that. I've been with you at meetings. I've been with you at events. You are proactive. You listen. Your cell phone is not in your hand. You're not talking to me and doing this. And when Phil Steck does that, or looking at his watch and telling me that he doesn't have much time, and I don't think a 7-minute interview is too much out of your day, it's disrespectful. We know where he stands on these issues in housing. He had told me in the interview that he was a landlord and they got rid of their property. They had one apartment. Whoop-de-doo. You had one apartment. You got rid. And his reasoning was that it is difficult to get rid of a tenant in New York. And that thought me, yeah, it's difficult because of people like you passing legislation and laws that have oppressed housing providers. We need to rescind a lot of this. One of the other things, and I wasn't going to mention it, but I will here. In April of 2019, Julius Salazar tried to corner me during my testimony in the state senate. I had stated that as the deeded owner, and I'm a landlord too, as the deeded owner of the property, that should be the only reason why I need to evict you. I own the property. I don't want you in anymore. Landlords don't want to evict tenants. That's the last thing that they want to do.
But if you own a second property and you have a mother who lives out of state and is, you want to move her close because you have a kid she's going to take care of, or she's not in great health, whatever the reason, or your kid comes back from college and you want them to live there, whatever the reason, you own that property. That's what it's there for.
Yes.
And
one of the scary things,
I would say, if you have a tenant who's in the middle of the lease, try to plan accordingly and give them the proper notice, and try to live. You got to be a person of your word and stick to the terms of a lease, and give them the opportunity to find a place. And I think that most people, especially, would say, if it takes you like a month longer before you move out, okay, whatever, we'll deal with it.
But landlords have been demonized for a long time. And it's time for that cloak of demonization to be removed, to realize that we're people too, and we are losing our properties, our investments. People will call us, it's not a real job, get a real job. Okay. I remember Salazar mentioned on Twitter that this method of passive income is not right. And during my testimony, I wanted to say to her, I had 16, 17 minutes for myself. I wanted to say to her, if you believe that passive income is not proper, then we need to shut down the stock market, mutual funds, all the casinos, where a person can sit on a chair and pull a lever and make $100,000. That's passive income. My stocks and my mutual funds right now are making me money while I'm talking to you. My property is making me money as well. Why is it that landlording is considered demonized? Passive income is wrong. We're making money off of tenants. Well, that's what we all do in this world. What say you?
I mean, most retirement accounts end up being passive income to some extent. What are you talking? That's crazy.
Yeah, that was Julius Salazar. That's
how people end up living when they're past the age where they're working. It's wild.
I'm self-employed for 32 years.
If I have, X amount of money per paycheck that I put in the stock market, or put in, what is the app, like Robinhood or something like that, and I'm, building a stock portfolio, and I have money that I've earned off of that, like, isn't that a good thing? I'm like investing in my future here.
Absolutely. One of the things that happened with good cause eviction in January of this year, the Legal Aid Society had put on Twitter regarding the good cause eviction and the health and the medical needs of tenants. Now, under good cause eviction, not paying your rent is grounds to be evicted. I mean, it's a no-brainer. But what legal aid did, and they showed their hand to me, and that was the wrong thing to do. Never show me what you don't want to show me. So I'm going to exploit it and I'm going to use it against you. What they said, Alexandra, was in January of 2022 that tenants should not have to choose between health care and rent. Therefore, their health care should come to rent, overcome rent, and should be first in line. And the next line after that is we need to pass good cause eviction. Well, if not paying your rent is grounds for an eviction under good cause eviction, is Legal Aid Society now telling us that if they go to court and they represent these tenants, and a tenant may have medical needs, good or bad, that's not the issue, whatever the medical issue is, we as landlords, that's not our problem that you have financial problems with your medical needs. Honestly, it's not our problem. But when they invoke the need for health care versus paying rent past good cause eviction, that is showing me that at some point, if good cause eviction does pass, that they're going to try to raise the defense of the tenant not paying rent for health reasons. Why, therefore, should landlords, how much more do landlords have to balance in their life on their own family and their own home and their own bills? Now they have to harbor that of their tenant.
I mean, I think that the comparison, or even there are mechanisms in the law for people who are unwell and need to go on disability to have basically go on Social Security disability, and you get paid, and you use that money to support yourself and pay your rent. And Medicare is there for people who, there's medical providers, there's ways to get free healthcare or low-cost healthcare if you make under a certain amount of money. There are those mechanisms there. And to sit there and say either you have to pay out of pocket for a $300,000 surgery that you didn't know you were going to need. I mean, the healthcare system's like a disaster. Nobody's gonna, I dare anyone to try to challenge me on that one and say that it's remotely functional. But there are mechanisms there for people who are unhealthy or who get sick or who get hurt to cover those costs, to subsidize those costs. And,
what we see here,
programs exist for that very purpose.
What we're seeing here, Alexandra, is what has been happening with the Zeldin camp, is that the other side, if you will, is using that two-word thing that scares everybody, fear-mongering.
They are, and they're doing it with every issue. The number one thing that just really grinds my gears is they have, in the wake of the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, they have just spun this abortion debacle they've made it a debacle. Right now in New York, you can get an abortion for free basically until the minute the kid's born. If you live outside of New York, you can come here, and you are encouraged by our governor and our politicians to come here and get one for free at any point in the pregnancy before that child is born. I was talking to a friend I used to work with, and he was like, that's not true. Most people won't even do it after 12 weeks. It's all like, Republicans making a big deal out of nothing. And I was literally like, it will take me 3 seconds to Google like where I could go right now. And I will. And there's like 5 places I could have gone within like 20 minutes of my house. So they're sitting here saying your rights are being taken away. No, they're not. Nothing changed in New York. Overturning Roe v. Wade was a win for state sovereignty. That is a basic principle that our nation was founded on. States have rights to make their own laws. There's autonomy there, and you have the right to go where, and you have a right to elect a representative who reflects your views. I am personally of the standpoint that our current law is barbaric, and I should not be in a position where I'm being forced to fund someone else's choice to abort a baby. And they're just making an issue out of a non-issue, and they keep screaming it from the rooftops. And they're lying to their base because they know it will make everybody light their hair on fire, and they want to drive people out to vote. So they're lying. And quite honestly, look over here at this abortion issue, because we don't want you looking over there where in your nice, once very peaceful suburb, cars are getting stolen out of driveways every night.
Oh my God.
The kid down the street is like calling in to work and using his paid time off because he can't fill his gas tank till payday.
Well, you have these catalytic converters. I see it all the time. People are going out and their cars are getting ransacked. The catalytic converters are being cut off their cars. So these people are, the whole society is running roughshod because our government here in New York, and I dare say the federal government, has allowed so many of the people who wish to be not to work, not to have to look for work, not to have their national grid paid for, their rent paid for. I have said, and I have yet to be challenged, and I encourage anyone to do so, that COVID-19 has been the best friend that tenants have ever had. And it really has been the best friend that they've ever had. And they don't want, oh no, you're fine. They don't want the status quo to change. It will take people like you to make that status quo change.
It will. But you know what? If we allow the people running mostly on the Democratic line, sorry, I'm just going to grab a cough drop.
Oh, absolutely. Please. I have my my favorite soda, A&W. I don't know if they're going to give me any money for promoting them.
Well, the halls that I'll take a donation to.
Now that we're sharing some stuff, some of you may see here, I'm embarrassed to tell you my glasses broke the other day. So my assistant and I held them together and he taped them up. I have new glasses coming next week. So you might see brown here and tape here, but don't look at it.
Don't worry, I've been there.
Oh my God. Well, I tried to wear them without the arm. I was at my desk and the arm just moved and it wouldn't stop moving until it fell off. And I thought maybe it was a screw.
Glasses. The more you spend on them, the sooner you'll break them. So you just want to find the cheapest pair and then you'll have them forever.
Don't say that. I just spent over $600 on 2 pair. I just spent over $600. Don't tell me that. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's cool.
I have 2 pair now, but I will tell you that I'm looking forward. And I think a lot of the people, my followers on and off Twitter, social media, Facebook, YouTube, we're looking forward to November more than ever. I will tell you, I don't want to be partisan, but we have to be. I would be a fool to say that what's happened in New York State since 2019, of which many of my people have asked, Matt, when did this happen? And I told them this happened in November of 2018. And they're like, what do you mean November 2018? I said, that is when the New York State Senate flipped to the Democratic Party, right? And I said, all of this legislation, all of these desires that they had, that they were just cultivating in their mouth and in their oh my God. When January hit, it was party central.
I thought they would kind of boil the frog a little more and like sneak it in a little slower.
Oh, but no.
It was like, boom. It was like, you blink and you miss it. Where do we even live now?
In April of 2000, go ahead, sorry, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, we cannot let them weaponize social issues. I know a lot of the young Republican candidates who are running and being vilified for being younger conservatives and being painted with whatever sort of negative stuff they would have painted Trump with. But we're people who grew up in a time when, we acknowledge that things like social issues like racial injustices or gender-based discrimination, we know those things are wrong. We understand that. We understand it exists in the world, but we also understand that things like public safety, things like ridiculous high taxes, horrifying inflation, it impacts everybody regardless of those factors. And if we can make those things better for everyone, then we move on and we address the other issues. We need to make sure that we are taking care of every person's fundamental needs first and foremost. And I see those things going by the wayside while, all we focus on are social issues, according to the Democrats. And that doesn't just hurt, they're not just hurting Republicans, they're hurting everybody.
Yes. As I alluded to earlier, when you can't take last month's rent, the tenants are not being able to be placed. Because of the oppressive acts that landlords are going through, a lot of them have said, whoa, they pulled back on the reins. They're warehousing apartments, so they're not renting them out until the stuff ends. Tenants cannot find a place to live. Now, one of the laws, and we've had such a great conversation here, I want to add one other thing. In April of 2019, under the New York State Human Rights Law, they call it lawful source of income. Any government-funded program is called lawful source of income.
Mhm.
And landlords cannot say, no, I don't want DSS. Some would call it welfare. I don't want ERAP. I don't want Section 8. I don't want any of those programs. And landlords who have said no to that are being demonized. I will tell you, for one, landlords should have that right to say, I wish not to take programs, because those programs come with this and that regulation, that regulation. You must do this, you must do that. Whereas a tenant who pays, like you would when you were a tenant, with a check or money order or cash, all that comes with is, I got to cash the damn thing at the bank. It doesn't come with, you got to do this or that. And I will tell you, and I think that many of our listeners now and in the replay, I will tell you honestly, and as a product of a person who grew up on welfare, and I was homeless when I was 17, I lived in the woods. I had $40 to my name, and that's all I had when I was 17. I now have houses and cars and a great business, and I'm thankful for that. But I had to say that, preface my next comment to say that I do not believe that any government program that pays you, gives you money, is a lawful source of income. It is not. And I, as the deeded owner of the property, should be able to say, I don't want to take programs. Because what happens there is that they've been deemed to be impoverished. And like I said, I was food stamps. My clothes came from Salvation Army. I've been there. But what happens then, Alexandra, is that when we want to vacate the tenant from our property for damages or owing back rent, since they're already on government subsidized programs, the ability to collect on that money that is owed is not going to happen. But if I went after you as an attorney, I know that if you owed me money and I sued you in court as a tenant and I won, I have a way to redress my grievances through processes like an income execution, property execution, and garnish your wages until your debt to me, has been satisfied. I wasn't going to talk about that, but it's been so great with you and I that I wanted to have you think. And if I'm throwing you under the bus, please forgive me. But what are your thoughts on landlords being forced to take? I read that there's a class action lawsuit in New York City where tenant advocates and tenant screeners had recorded, and it's legal, as you know, one notification they recorded real estate brokers, big firms, little firms, over 70 firms and brokers said, we do not take programs. Now there's a class action lawsuit against them, and everything has been recorded. They are going to lose. They all will lose because the evidence is splayed right out there in court. But, and I'm long winded here, but what do you think? Should landlords be able to say no to social welfare programs paying the rent for their tenants? What do you think?
I think if they make it, they create a way they basically create an insurance policy for the landlords so that they have some sort of recourse, that's one thing. But I fundamentally disagree with the lifestyle sort of, I don't think that welfare should be a long-term thing. Just like in my field, people on workers' comp, it's not intended to be a long-term thing. It's intended to be something to lift you out of bad circumstances or hold you over during a rough period.
Yeah.
And, I don't see why, if they're, I'm not very well versed in the law. I mean, I've lived in apartments and had to go in and show them pay stubs and say, I make whatever. I think some of them were like, you need to make 40 times the rent.
Oh my
And
God, that's
in
crazy.
New York City. And, between me and roommates.
Yeah,
when
maybe, yeah.
But in a shoebox apartment,
Oh my God, yes.
you need to make whatever it is, or 20 times the rent, something like that. I've always had to show proof of that income, or if not, get a guarantor or something to that effect. Essentially, there should be, I don't see why wanting to protect your interests would be the problem. Why a landlord wanting to make sure that if I rent to somebody and they don't pay me, I can go after them and I can recoup my loss.
Yes.
So if there was some mechanism to allow that, or to guarantee payments of some kind, I mean, I don't know what specifically it would be, and that would be something I'd love to discuss with you if I won.
Sure.
You know,
Not if, when you win.
Yes. I
When you win.
don't want to jinx myself. Knock on wood.
No way. You
Um,
gotta get in.
I know. I'm going crazy, so I'm working my butt off trying to get out there and meet as many people as I can, and
Oh, absolutely.
make sure everyone knows that I'm here and I want to help. But I definitely think that there, if you're going to force landlords to take any person, whether it's, if you're going to limit the criteria they can look at, there needs to be a really good reason why. And if you're going to force them to take people that, are on these programs, you can't leave them with no recourse that they would have if they rented to anyone else.
When you look at all these things that I mentioned tonight, and I will tell you, Alexandra, I just touched on a few. When you look at just the ones I've addressed here this evening with us, it's no wonder why landlords are raising the rents.
Oh yeah.
So and then landlords are saying, I'm not going to rent to you, you, or you because of this, or this, which they legally can do. But then other variables they can't, or any criterion that they want to have to utilize, they can't. When you look at all of that, the people in power now in New York State, they wonder why things are happening the way they are, why people are maybe homeless, or why landlords are saying, no, I'd rather keep it empty than put somebody in, and I'll lose the revenue because I get you in, I'm not getting any rent. Now I have to worry about destruction of property, or the utilities having to be put in my name because you won't pay for them yourself. So, again, like I said earlier, there are people in government, and we all know who they are. They try to solve a problem that doesn't exist, but now it's a problem because they tried to solve it.
Mm-hmm.
And that has to stop. When we look at all of these things, it's no wonder why the housing industry, right now, we see houses right now that are so highly priced that interest rates are going up. The housing market is dropping, it's slowing down. And what will happen, the same thing that happened a number of years ago, is that people are going to buy these homes that are astronomically high, and then they're going to owe more on it than what it's owed. Then nobody's going to want to buy it, or they're going to be back in the situation that they were, I believe it was in 2008, 2007, when they'll be back there again. You have landlords who are looking at properties. I've seen them locally here, where 2 or 3 families going for $250,000, $300,000 in a depressed, understood, depressed community. And I look at the home that I live in, and I look at what these rents are when they have to be, because what the government has done to landlords. The rents, Alexandra, are so high that add a couple $100 to what they're paying in rent. They can live in my 3,500 square foot home on 5 acres with 18-foot ceilings and 15-foot ceilings, 5 bedroom, 2.5 bedroom house is what I live in. Not bragging, but showing the comparison of what I pay to live in my home in this beautiful, magnificent home that I love. And I look at what they're paying in rents in certain depressed communities across New York State, and I understand why the rents are so high. And I'm like, my God, how can they do this? Rents at $1,600, $1,700 a month for a 2 or 3 bedroom outside of New York City. In New York City, $4,000 and $5,000.
Oh, I know. And during COVID, um, rent when there was some obviously like you couldn't get a moving truck to get out of the city. I mean, myself included. I basically just gave my furniture to a neighbor. I was like, I'm going, bye.
And
But,
came back home.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
But rents, it was, I have a relative who's he's an accountant and in his mid 20s, and he was like, oh, I got this awesome apartment. It's in Manhattan and it's like a duplex and it's got 2 bedrooms and
Oh
it's
my
so
God.
cheap. And I was like, oh honey, just wait. Guess who's moving out?
Yes. Because he can't afford the
Oh
rent.
yeah, I mean the rent's
What's
dropped
the rent, Alexandra?
dramatic.
What
I
was
don't
he
know.
paying in rent? About 4,000
I
or
think
so?
he was paying like somewhere around 2 at first, but which is a lot. But for that kind of apartment in that area of the city, I mean, when I was even living there, it would have been way more than that. But then, now it's like well over 4,000, I think.
My God.
But he had a good year there, I guess.
He can say he remembers when.
For a year.
He can tell his grandchildren many years from now where he lived and what he paid in rent.
I know. I was like, okay, you're going back to a normal people apartment now, right?
Yes, yes. I mean, I remember my first apartment was $325 a month. Back in 1987 was my first apartment, and it's 3 and a quarter. And now I couldn't even think, when we look at people that have their houses now, we're telling them, yeah, you may have high taxes, but if you have to go pay rent somewhere, your tax is going to be less than rent. That's a scary thing, that your taxes are less than the rent that you would pay in somebody's apartment.
I mean, even when I was in college, my first apartment with my best friend we lived in Spanish Harlem, and it was a walk up to like the moon. I remember our dads coming when we moved in, and by the time they got up there, they looked at us and they were like, we're never coming back here again. We're not doing these stairs. But, it was about $1,200 a piece. And our mothers were like, God, like, you could have a house for this.
Yes. Yes.
You could buy a house. And we were like,
Well, I see vouchers.
Throwing our money away, but
I'm seeing vouchers when people are advertising on social media looking for an apartment in New York City. I'm seeing Section 8 vouchers for 2 bedroom for $2,000 or $3,000. And I'm like, honestly, my feeling is that for a voucher that high, if you are on government assistance, without sounding unpolitically correct here, my feeling is that if you can't afford to live in New York City, don't live in New York City.
that's what I mean, quite honestly, I moved because I was sick of having to spend my whole paycheck on rent. And, and I've had some real rough apartments. I mean, I literally had a bedroom in one apartment that was a glorified shelf in the living room with like an attic ladder that dropped down. But when it dropped down, it covered the front door, so I couldn't go to sleep till everyone was home.
Oh my God. But these are funny stories that you can remember. Oh.
I was, young and fun, but you get older and your priorities change, and that kind of rent it's unsustainable. That's why people say, when I get married and have kids, I'm leaving the city, because you have additional expenses and it's not sustainable. And I would say I don't want to see that happen up here, and I hate that the rents are going up so high. But then I look at the grocery bills that are also going up so high.
Oh my God, yes.
Like, look at your gas and electric bill. I mean, it hasn't even really gotten cold yet, and my gas and electric bill is already higher. When I kick on the heat in this house, I mean, I'm just gonna go put on an extra layer.
That's what I do. I have in my home here, we eat with fuel oil because we don't have gas lines, but I have pellet stoves. I have fuel oil. When I'm not in a suit and tie, if I'm home, it's fleece pants or sweatshirt, to keep the oil prices. I mean, oil prices are high. I have 3 oil tanks. Under the and again, we get politically, but under the Trump administration, the oil prices are so low, I fill 3 of my tanks. The last time I got them filled, the price I paid to fill 3, I filled 1.
Mhm.
1.
I mean,
You
just
know,
look at the gas prices. And, you know, I think too about a lot of the green energy initiatives. They want us to go the way of California, but
mm,
New York has we have a totally different climate. We have just as, our grid could not handle the level of electricity use that they would want to put into it. But at this point, I look at these initiatives like you having to rip out your heating system by 2030 or 2035 and replace it with electric. First of all, where do they think electricity comes from?
yes.
Second,
Who's got that
it's
kind of
not
money?
cheap.
Yeah, who's got that kind of money? And they told me that I had to replace all of the heating systems in the house. I had to put ductwork in my home, and I don't want to do that. Even now, my hot water tank is run on fuel oil, and I'm ready to convert that honestly to electric. It's going to be cheaper for me to have an electric hot water tank, and that was always something. Oh my God, never have electric, have gas. Well, now with the fuel oil prices they are, I'm thinking of converting it to electric because it'll be cheaper for me than the gas.
I
So
mean, with that kind of thing, though, I think about like elderly people who are in their homes in this area who are on a fixed income and didn't anticipate that kind of major cost ever coming up. What is their option other than to say, I'm selling this house and I'm getting out of here? I'm going to go to Florida. I'll be able to sell my house for enough money to buy me something there I can live in.
yes, yes.
I
And
don't have to come up with $10,000 to do this.
yeah.
I
When we
can't.
look at things, Alexandra, when I go to the grocery store, everything that I bought before I can afford to buy today. I
Mhm.
can do that. And I'm saying when I look at the price, I'm like, oh no. And I leave it on the shelf, I leave it in the cooler, I leave it in the freezer, I leave it. So if I'm leaving it behind and I can afford to pay for it, then how many people who are in the fridges of can I buy it or not who are saying I absolutely cannot buy it? And you see, I'm looking at gallon of milk, dozen eggs. We reduce down what we eat here, and I shouldn't have to do that. I work 7 days a week. I should be able to eat what I want. And I like a lot of butter on my toast. I like a lot of butter on my vegetables. But at $5 a pound for butter, I don't put the butter on it anymore. And maybe it's good for my health. I don't know, but I don't want the government to tell me to restrict my diet because I just don't want to pay those kind of prices. So when we add all those prices in, and we add in, that landlords can't raise their rents any higher. They have to fix these properties and buy goods and materials and services to fix up the properties. When you add all of the oppressions that we mentioned tonight,
Mhm.
and the others of going to the store and buying lumber, when lumber, 8 months ago was astronomically high.
Oh, yeah.
When you add that all in, and then the government leaders, and I use that word loosely, leaders, when they look at us and say, well, you can't raise your rent more than this, and you gotta do this, and you gotta do that, what do they think will happen when the mom and pop say goodbye and the big conglomerates come in and the tenants come to court with legal aid or a pro bono attorney who, has to do it? They're going to be going up against the ones who have lots of money, deep pockets, who are not going to tolerate the antics of a legal aid society attorney or someone
Mhm.
else. And these tenants who, even now, these tenants who thought they had it so bad then are having it bad now. And it's not because of us landlords. It's because of the government of New York State.
It is. And, I think about that. What's going to happen when everybody who is renting out a home has to go replace the heating system for $10,000 or whatever?
Yes,
It's
yes,
gonna it's gonna be horribly detrimental to both the landlords and the tenants. And right now, you know, it's it's hurting everybody. It's hurting the landlords, it's hurting the tenants. And, you know, I can only compare it to the field I work in, where, you know, all of this stuff is not, it's not that it's just hurting employers because their premiums are going up when they have to pay workers' comp insurance. It's also hurting the injured worker because they're getting this dragged out forever. They're on a reduced income forever. They're not getting the treatment they need. So you've got the employer hurting because this case is dragging out and sitting on their policy and jacking up their premiums. You've got the employee who's not getting treatment, not getting what they need. Who's benefiting? Defense attorneys and insurance companies.
Yes, yes. And that's a whole shame, even in, like I say, in the housing market, what so many are going through, the suffering, the pain, going to their properties, not allowed to fix them up, and they have no money to fix it. They're being fined for not fixing it, and the government is just looking at this and saying, well, you can get money later on, and it'll turn around. And in the meantime, these same people that are saying this had their hands out and getting their $110,000 pay as a state legislator working part time. One of the phrases that I tell people that they love this. This is one of my adages, Alexandra.
Mhm.
It's easy to tell someone how to live when you don't have to live the way you're telling them how to live.
Mhm.
And that's what New York State government, as it is now, seems to be an aristocracy where they look down upon us plebeians and us peasants, and say, well, you're going to do what we tell you to do. And it's been reversed. Back in the day, the aristocrats, the upper crust, were looked down upon, and now the government has switched that around and has looked down upon landlords. One of the things that's been happening is there's been a cry to build more affordable housing. And
Mhm.
a few years ago, one of the county economic development chiefs went to a meeting that I attended. And they're building all this housing and whatnot, low income. And I had asked him, well, what about the properties outside of those structures that mom and pops can't put that kind of money into the property to make it look like the building next door? So now they can't get tenants because it's cheaper for the tenant to live in a beautiful new building that's furnished, security, human security guards, locked doors, all this other stuff. They can't afford it. His answer to me, and I told him that he was wrong, the economic development chief, he said, good money follows good money. That may be, but not when you're a mom and pop, when you don't have the good money that he claims that follows. It doesn't happen.
I
And
mean, that kind of goes back to what we said at the beginning. I think a lot of people look at the landlord tenant dynamic as, you know, the ultra mega billionaire versus the impoverished, you know, guy living on the streets. And that's just not what it is.
no, it's not.
You know, maybe in some situations, you know, everybody's different.
One
But
of one of my tenants in one of my houses, the first tenant that lived there destroyed the $3,000 refrigerator. I lived in the home. I rented that house and moved to a bigger house. But that $3,000 refrigerator was ruined by the tenant. Got them out. They moved voluntarily. I got other tenants in during COVID or before COVID. The whole process was stymied to get my tenants out in that one particular house. I got a judgment for over $14,000 in rent. They've done over $10,000 in damage to the property. There's already income executions against the male tenant. The female tenant doesn't work. Where am I going to get that $24,000? There's well over 10,000. They ruined the air conditioning system. That's $5,000 alone. The
mhm.
government tells me, oh, well, maybe I can take out a loan. And I can. I can afford and to take the loss. But the question and the issue is that why should we take the loss? Because the government thinks that we can afford to do so.
Oh yeah, it's just, it's not,
It's
they
not
shouldn't
fair.
be counting anyone else's money or, you know, dictating how anyone else spends their money. I mean, obviously, you know, you want to protect people from slumlords, from instances of discrimination that are, you know, just completely off the charts wrong. There needs to be basic tenant protections. I'm not nuts.
Right. Right.
But I'm not a monster. But this micromanaging, how everybody spends their own money, how everybody, there's no accountability. There's no accountability for the tenant who gets into this, or the landlord who, you're two adults making an agreement.
Right.
Live up to your word. If not, there's consequences. And those consequences should be spelled out in the agreement.
And it shouldn't be up to a legislature or the court to, I mean, if the agreement is very egregious, absolutely get rid of it. If the lease is
but
I've
that's
seen
the
leases.
principle of contract law.
Right.
The unconscionable agreement, the inequity of bargaining power, or whatever. The more sophisticated party, typically contracts are construed against the party who drafted them, which would be the landlord.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I can tell you, this has been a great interview. I only thought we'd go for a half an hour. We've gone for an hour and a half. I love it.
God, I didn't even
realize an hour and a half we've been going. It's been great. If I could go on for hours.
Stairs for this whole time, so it wasn't barking like a wild man.
Oh, my cat is somewhere around here. She hasn't been meowing, so she's in the other room. But if there any closing comments, I would tell everybody this is the man that Alexandria is running against, Phil Stack. We don't support him, the landlord advocates don't. Many landlords do not. As I alluded to earlier, I met Alexandra a few months ago. She was very receptive to talking to me before she even knew who I was. And then when I told her who I am and the social media influence that we carry, and I said, would you be willing to discuss this? She said, absolutely. But with her schedule in mind, it was really hard to get together. So I got with her earlier this week and said, Alexandra, how does? She said, that works great. And here tonight is where we had this great meeting with Alexandra.
I'm so appreciative. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Any closing comments that you would like to make, maybe to the landlords, the housing providers who are watching this now or who will be watching this in the replay?
Just it's more important than ever that you get out to vote, get your friends out to vote, get your family out to vote. And, don't let people pull the wool over your eyes and try to scare you into thinking that a lot of these social issues are like, that the Democrats are the only ones who care about social issues. People care. We all care. We just want to fix the fundamentals. And we care about keeping our community safe and affordable and making sure that more of your money is in your pockets so you can decide how to spend it. I can't thank you enough for all of your support. And,
Well, we were
I'm local candidates wherever you are in New York because we all need it.
Yes. Well, Joe Mastriani is going to be on the show next Friday at 6:30. Joe is also a local gentleman, as you know. And our viewers know
Joe well.
Oh, Joe's a great guy. I can tell you that as Alexandra, you may see here on the screen, we created this banner for her, and we shared all of our social media to let people know to get Stack out and get her in. And we endorse Alexandra Velella for the Assembly District 110 that is part of upstate New York. And we want to see you win. And I'm going to see you outside of this little camera that I'm talking to you in front of at other events very shortly.
We're a lot of us, I know Joe's included in this, a lot of the younger sort of newbies we're going up against establishment figures with big money, big budgets. And, they've been doing this for years and they're very complacent, but they can basically buy and sell these elections. So we need to beat them with the grit and determination and people really getting behind us and getting out there and doing the legwork. So, like I said, if you're watching and you have sort of any passion about any of these issues, just call up your local candidate, send them an email and just say, I want to help. We need people out there knocking on doors. We need people to be volunteering to help put out lawn signs, and the list is endless. And that stuff, financial contributions are great, and I certainly wouldn't turn any down. But, the people getting out there and like putting in the work to support our candidacies and to support these issues it's worth its weight in gold. And
we've been working with We've been working with the Zeldin campaign since June. We're
Mhm.
trying to get him to give us a virtual interview for about 10 minutes. I know he can't go longer, but about 10 minutes to have him address the same issues that we have talked about tonight. Because as he said in June at the rally at Social Plaza in Glenville,
Mhm.
that social media is a big platform that is used so much. And the young people, as you know, as you alluded to, the young people use social media so much more than the newspaper or television. And we need to reach out to them more. And I will tell you on Twitter, I've seen it, but we got to do more to let the people know that, hey, we are here. We care about you. The Democrats want to hold your hand through the process. The Republicans want to show you how you can do it on your own.
Mhm.
And that's what we want to do. I can tell you, I'm a former Democratic Party official. And I will tell you that because it's gone so far, they call it progressive. I think that's an oxymoron to call it progressive because it's not.
Mhm.
But and I left the party a few years ago, and I have been welcomed so much into the Republican Party. I enjoy my time helping everyone. I'm glad I can come with all of the experience I have and sitting on the boards I've had to help get the Republicans elected because and coming from somebody who was a Democrat, somebody who was poor and homeless, somebody who was on food stamps and welfare and not knowing where my next meal was coming from, to show I had a helping hand for welfare and I had a helping hand for my second family. But when you constantly are feeding someone and giving them housing and heat, and they don't have to worry about it, so the lights will always be on or off, the food will always be in the fridge, the roof will always be over their head because we, the taxpayers, are taking care of them. That has to end, and that will end when the red wave covers not only New York State, but also the United States.
I couldn't agree more. And like I said, get out there and support, especially, Zeldin is the polls are unbelievable to see how much momentum he's gained. And, you know, getting him over the finish line with a victory will have a down ballot effect, no doubt in my mind.
Absolutely.
If we can pull this off, we can really make change in the state and claw back some of the lunacy that has just
Oh, yeah.
made it pretty much unlivable. I mean, New York has become known for crime and corporate flight. We don't want that.
I mean, everybody's leaving because of the oppression of taxes, regulation upon business. There was a business that had some restaurants in New York City during COVID, and his revenue was only about 10% daily than what it was before. He had left New York City for Florida. And this, again, I didn't think I was going to talk about that, but he actually said, I will never come back to New York because the lack of regulations and the taxes that I don't have to pay in Florida, I am making much more money than I ever have in the state of Florida than I was in the state of New York. In
Oh,
the
yeah.
state of New York during COVID, the businesses were not required and the landlords could not go after businesses that were not able to pay their rent. So all that money was gone. There is and I'll end on this, there was a Victoria's Secret in New York City. It's the big
Oh, yeah. I
flagship
heard
store.
about that. Like in
Their
Times
rent,
Square or something.
yeah, their rent is over $900,000 per month. Over $900,000 per month. My God, that's crazy. But it has to be because of the government regulations. It's crazy. But I will tell you, viewers, that when we get people like Alexandra in, when we keep Mary Beth Walsh in, and we get Joe Mastriani in, and Rich Amador, when we get people like that in, we will see a change in New York. And New York may again become the empire state it once was. But right now it's not. And we have got to be able to change that by electing people like the woman that has interviewed me so great, or I have interviewed so graciously for almost 90 minutes.
Oh, wow.
I know it's been great.
Talk your ear off.
Oh, Alexandra, thank you for joining us. I will see you in the real world shortly,
Yes.
but absolutely here on the virtual world. We and the landlord advocates endorse you. We thank you for joining us, and we look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you so much. Bye
You're
bye.
welcome. Bye bye. Good night. As you see, Lilas, we had just finished our interview with Alexandra. I keep adding that I in there, and there's no I. Velella, who is running against Phil Steck uh, here in the upstate region, the colony, parts of Schenectady area of the state assembly. Now, some of you have asked me on our social media if I could produce a video of those candidates and current office holders who you believe would be most in favor of issues facing landlords here in New York State. I would be happy to do that, but I must tell you that there's so many of them, I don't know their background, but I'm going to invite you to leave comments here and let me know who you think we should talk to between now and election day. I'm willing to do that. As I've told you before, I go 7 days a week. My day started at 4:30 this morning. It is now 8 o'clock, and I'd be more than happy to do more. We need to get these certain people that are in office out, and we need to keep certain people who want to get in from getting in and keeping them out. Alexandra Velella is one that we need to get in, and we need to get Phil Steck out. Next Friday at 6:30 p.m., we're going to be interviewing Joseph Mastriani, who is an assembly candidate in upstate New York, who is running against Angela Santa Barbara for the seat in that assembly district. That will also be a very engaging interview. We look forward to that, and we look forward to all of you joining us who have joined us live tonight and who will be in the replay. We invite you to join us here next Friday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and bring your questions. Many of you are here, but you didn't ask questions. Ask those questions so that we can put the candidates on the hot seat so that they will learn what our impressions are, what our issues are, what it is that we're looking to have changed here in New York State, as I said earlier, to put New York State back on the map as the Empire State in the United States of America. Until next Friday, take care.